Hey, winos! Welcome back to Wine with HR, where we pair workplace truths with whatever we're sipping. Today, we're talking about one of the most important and most misunderstood skills in HR and management, although primarily in HR, workplace investigations.
And listen, we get it. The word investigation can make everyone a bit tense, like we're about to put on a trench coat and interrogate somebody under a desk lamp. Come on, you really should be thinking of us more like Inspector Gadget. We're not that bad.
But a good investigation isn't as dramatic as the stuff we see on TV. It's structured, fair fact finding. And a bad investigation, well, that's how you end up in investigate bad times. Come on. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.
I love dancing with you. So, we're going to break down why investigations matter for HR and managers and what to do when a complaint hits your desk. And the biggest mistakes we see that turn a manageable situation into a five-alarm fire. But first, the wine. Julie, what you drinking?
I am drinking a bubbly cava from Aveline or Aveline. I'm not 100% sure how to say that, but you've probably seen this one all over Instagram, Facebook, all the social media. Cameron Diaz is one of the owners. It is another one that is supposed to be, it's made with organic grapes. It's supposed to be low in sugar, et cetera, and it's free from concentrates and artificial colors. This is their sparkling rosé cava. That's quite nice. So we both know I'm not a huge sparkling fan. But every once in a while, bubbles are fun.
Bubbles are always fun. I need to clarify that. Maybe not for you and your drink, but bubbles are always fun.
True. Fair point. So I do like it. It's very mild. It's a little bit sweet, but not too much because we know I like dry. So yeah, so far I like it.
So I wanted to focus on something a little bit different for our listeners who do not partake, but really are still interested in getting out and enjoying a summer mocktail. I'm not a big fan of the non-alcoholic wines, I will admit. So I just was like, you know what? I want to sprinkle in a few mocktails this year. So this first one that I made, I'm absolutely loving. I love the fact that when I first sat down with it, both Julie and Brenna were like, ooh, what a pretty color. It really is. It's such a fantastic kind of a peachish, kind of a little bit of a hint of red in there. Reminds me of a beautiful sunset. What it is basically cranberry juice, orange juice, lime, and ginger ale. But of course, because I am from Michigan and want a little bit of an extra kick, I didn't use like Schweppes or one of the typical ginger ales or Canada Dry. I went with, Julie, what am I doing instead?
Burners.
Yes, Burners. Being a Michigan gal too, it's been a while, but we do love our Burners.
I tend to associate that, or I did for years, with, being sick. That's what your mom would give you when you had a tummy ache. So you'd get like Vernors and crackers. Yeah, it's probably much better in what you're having.
Funny thing is for me, and that is actually why I have Vernors in the house at the moment, was because I had a cold and we used to heat it up with a little bit of lemon juice and honey, kind of like a non-alcoholic hot toddy, when we were sick. So same type of idea. Vernors is great for everything. So it's delicious, and I could just go on and on about it, but I won't. For those out there who have suggestions on mocktails, I would love to have some more, but this one is phenomenal.
I'm just laughing that your parents made you a non-alcoholic version, whereas my parents gave me whiskey, honey, and lemon from the time I was about 5. So,
Fair.
just, you know, But anyway, okay, so we've done the wine. You know what time it is, Trisha?
Stat time. Ba-na-na-na-na-na.
Yeah, we do need a little like whatever that
Yeah.
music is.
I don't know. We need something. We are actually going to keep this one practical and real world. So, investigations are one of the fastest ways you can build trust with your employees or completely destroy it. So, I want to share two types of investigations or trends that we're seeing right now. First of all, let's talk about frequency trends. Julie and I talk a lot about how incivility is creeping in more and more into the workplace. And so wanted to give you this. 30% of ER professionals juggle more than 26 employee issues at any given time. That one is crazy sauce. And depending on what type of environment you are in, for your smaller organization, you may only see one or two per quarter. And there's a whole reason we're talking about that stat. We'll talk about it in a little while. You may not be as accustomed really to doing those. Whereas your high volume environments, you might see 1 to 10 investigations a day. Think like healthcare, hospitality, something like that. The important part here for me, though, is definitely this idea that we're getting more and more based on incivility.
Yeah, and I think that some other interesting stats are that, as you mentioned, it really depends on the company size and structure as to how many investigations you might get or how long that those might take. But the average timeline for an investigation seems to be 30 to 45 days. Now, again, that depends on the complexity. So, simple cases may take only a few days or a day, depending, while complex or sensitive cases tend to take longer. As we're going to talk about, these are not something that you want to rush. You want to be as quick as possible while being as thorough as possible. And thorough matters more than quick in this situation.
You may be asking yourself why investigations matter so much. Because the investigation is the bridge between a concern that was raised by your employee and we did something reasonable about it. Without that bridge, you're guessing, reacting, and hoping you guessed right.
And for our managers, this is the part that is so important. You are usually the first phone call. You are the one that your employees are most likely to reach out first, and your response is going to impact everything that happens thereafter. So if your initial response is like, yeah, okay, whatever, I'll take care of it, and you don't, then that is going to taint it for the rest of for that employee who came to you, and also everybody that employee talks to. So you really are the first line of defense. If you do a good job when that employee comes to you, and as we'll talk about in just a minute, the good news is you don't have to do a whole lot. You just have to recognize that they're coming to you with a concern. You have to listen, and then you get to say, I'm going to take you over to HR. And then you kind of get to wipe your hands clean of it. So, although it can be scary, it really is so, so, so important what happens during that initial interaction when an employee comes to you with a concern.
Let's get a definition straight here. When we are talking about an investigation, we are talking about a structured fact finding. This isn't like, oh, let's do a pulse check. Let's check the vibe, right? It's not going around asking, it's not deciding who you believe and going backward. We want to make sure that we are focusing on the facts in that situation and then looking at the facts and applying them to our policies.
Yeah, you want to focus on the complaint, not the complainant. So, a lot of times you may have an employee who comes to you who, is an employee who, for lack of a better phrase, has cried wolf before, and you're like, oh boy, here we go again. But This time it could be legit. So every single time you have to treat it like it is and, then do the investigation and let HR do the investigation. The most common triggers that we see for investigations are, of course, the ones you think about: harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment, retaliation, bullying, safety concerns. But then there are some other ones that maybe aren't as common, but those could be things that have to do with either timekeeping or pay issues, ethics or fraud, or any of those like my coworkers or my manager are making my life miserable, or they're creating a hostile work environment, or I have a conflict with one. I just can't work with this person. All of those kind of just like workplace issues that we've talked about where you have to have difficult conversations or do some conflict resolution or things like that. Those are the things that tend to show up as complaints.
Okay, winos. So here's our simple investigative framework. Not the crazy long version. I promise you, this is the I can actually do this version. We think you're going to like this a lot. So let's talk about the very first step, which would be doing your intake and protect. What you want to make sure is that you thank the person who brought this to you, the reporter. Get the basic information and assess if there are any immediate risks. So think about it. Is there a person who's in danger? Do we need to separate two or three or four of your employees? Are there any interim measures that you want to take or maybe that you need to take under the law? Have you reminded them or anybody else that you're speaking to about your retaliation policies and what kind of anti-retaliation measures are you going to take during the process?
Yeah, and one little caveat, oftentimes an interim measure could look like retaliation. So you need to be a little bit careful there. So, for example, if you have somebody who comes to you and they have a concern or a complaint about discrimination or harassment, and you think, oh, well, it's against their manager, and we can't put their manager on administrative leave because that person manages too many people. So we'll just put the person who complained on administrative leave. Even if it is paid, that looks like retaliation. So you need to be very, very careful there. So remember, intake and protect, like Trisha just said. The second step is plan. So write down the allegations. Your job as manager, if you are the very first person they have come to, is to think of yourself as the most detailed and careful note taker on the planet. So your job is to write down everything they tell you. Then you want to go to HR with that. And you want to tell the employee that you are going to go to HR, that you also encourage them to go to HR, but you're going to report it to HR, and HR is probably going to be reaching out to them. Some of what HR is then going to do, just so you know, is they're going to pull up any relevant policy. They're going to figure out who they need to talk to, probably after they have a longer conversation with the employee who came to you with the concern. They'll think about what kind of evidence might exist. So, for our HR professionals out there, that could be things like emails, text messages, screenshots of text messages, calendar appointments, time records, video surveillance. There's so many places with video cameras nowadays. Sorry, it's always a good thing to check. And even badge access if you need to check that somebody was where they said they were on a particular day. So there's all sorts of things. Obviously, Trisha and I teach 2-day courses on this. We have our very own investigation boot camp. So there's a lot of other things we could be talking about, but that's kind of high level, the types of documents that you in HR might be needing to look for, and you as a manager, just again, so you kind of have the background of what HR might be looking for, so that if you know of any relevant documents or any relevant information that might exist, you can help them out a little bit and give them a head start.
Going along with what Julie just said, don't forget that all of this evidence that you gather, you somehow need to preserve it. So do not wait, right? Any of these documents that Julie just mentioned, you want to request them. If it's screenshots, get a copy of them, get those access logs before things disappear. You also want to make sure that as you're kind of aligning all of this, you start thinking about who you want to interview and in what order. So, this obviously is going to be shifting more to HR at this point. Usually, you as a manager would be stepping back, but there are some cases where managers may, and notice I'm saying may, be a part of this process. Typically, you're going to hear HR say that they want to protect you at this point. They're going to thank you for doing everything that you've done, but they want to keep you protected from yourself, from the law, from any knowledge that you really don't want to have or need to have. So they will typically take over. If you know of any witnesses, though, that you think based on the information that were given to you, make sure that you're sharing them, those with your HR professionals, and then they will come up with the correct order. Most of the time they are going to talk to the reporter first, and then they're going to try to think about who are those key witnesses, who really has the substantive information that we want. And then finally, the subject themselves. Now, obviously, there are going to be exceptions to this. This is kind of just your basic order. But when I'm teaching the classes, I always ask everybody, okay, let's think about it. Do we run a risk? Are there people that are friends? Does someone have information that we might want to get out first? Is there risk to interviewing person A before B before C, is exactly what we're talking about here. And then finally, is there some sort of immediacy? Maybe you have a 1, 2, or 3-part issue coming. And then what I'm always focusing on is what is the one that could cause, maybe put someone in the most danger or have the biggest impact on us. We want to make sure that the immediacy is addressed and we're really taking care of those people.
Yeah, everything Trisha said times two. But also, one more comment. Managers, hear me. Hear me, please. Under no circumstance should you be doing your own investigation while HR does theirs. That is a big,
Never, ever, 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 never.
that is a big, big no no. It will get you your name on the chalkboard by Julie and Trisha. That is a big, big no no. That can create all sorts of liability and headaches and hurt the credibility of the investigation. So please, please, please do not do that. Okay, so then the next thing that HR is going to have to do after they have interviewed everybody is assess credibility. And this can sometimes feel really icky because you are making judgments about people. But that is your job as an investigator. You are the one who first-handedly heard these witnesses, heard what they told you. Hopefully, many of your interviews are either done in person or over video conference, so you got to see their facial expressions, how they answered things, and you get a sense for who you believe more than who you don't. And that is really important. So you want to look for those credibility issues, which can include things like, is their story consistent? Have they been consistent every time they've spoken to you? Have you been able to corroborate anything that they have said? If not, might make their testimony a little questionable. If you have, that does give them more credence. Plausibility. Does what they are telling you even make sense? Or are you scratching your head like, huh? What? And do they have a motive to lie? So you want to look at all of those things, not who you like or who you think is a good guy or a good gal, or, you don't want to go on gut feeling. This is not the time. This is not the time. Implicit bias can arise so easily in an investigation, and it can lead you down the wrong path. I'm sure you have all watched Law and Order or any of the cop shows where they focus on a suspect, and that's all that they look for the evidence to confirm that it was this person because they desperately want it to be this person. That can happen in a civil investigation too, in a workplace investigation. So we want to be as objective as we can be, and that requires us to really look at these types of things: consistency, corroboration, plausibility, and motive.
For our HR professionals out there, when you are talking about credibility, do me a huge favor. Make that a separate section. Don't put your credibility assessment in the fact section, right? We want to give this kind of visual indicator to the reader that we recognize this is our opinion and not facts, which is why we put it in its separate section. So just kind of a little reminder there. And then you have to decide and document. That's what we're going to call this next step: decide and document. Do you find that there is merit to this claim, or could you not find any proof? So what we're talking about are the words substantiate and unsubstantiated. I don't use them. I feel like they're legal terms. So I, as a non-practicing attorney at this point, I'm like, I couldn't prove it. I could prove it. You talk to your counsel, you use the words that are comfortable for you. But the whole point is that we're trying to say either we were able to close this and find evidence, or we weren't, or it's completely inconclusive. We have no idea. That's okay. Even if it's inconclusive, what we have to do is explain what we found and why in the absolute plainest language that you can do. Put your decision and then the why. Julie and I are always talking about the why. This is probably one of the most important whys you will ever document.
Yeah, and on that note, I like to use sufficient or insufficient evidence because I feel like those are more neutral to Trisha's point about,
I love that.
right? Yeah, like substantiated, unsubstantiated do sound kind of legally, and they do also sound, quite frankly, pretentious. And it's hard. They're also vague. Like, what does that even mean? So I like to say there was either sufficient or insufficient evidence to support the person's claim. So
I'm totally adding that to my list right as we're speaking of things that I want to say. Thank
there
you.
you go. You're welcome.
Cheers.
Okay, step 7, act and follow up. So if you decided that some sort of corrective action had to be taken, make sure that that action actually happens. If you need to do training or you need to change a policy, modify a policy, create a new policy, whatever the case may be, you want to do that. I think the hardest are the cases where you aren't able to prove that something happened because you are still left with an employee who is upset about something. And if that thing that they are upset about involves the conduct of another employee, whether that be a manager or a coworker, you've still got that hanging out there. So in those cases, you may need to do an employee mediation. You may have to have a sit down with both parties. You may have to think about if you could transfer somebody, but again, be careful because if you transfer the complainant, it can look like retaliation. So, those are the situations where you really want to consult with legal counsel to get some guidance on what is going to be the best way to proceed. But don't think you can just go back to a complainant and say, there was insufficient evidence to support your claim and leave it at that because that ain't going to cut it.
Bye. Peace out. Yeah,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah, no, not going to work. Not going to work. Okay. So now that we've talked about the 7 steps, and of course, there are many others. You could break them down a million different ways, but this is a podcast episode, so we're keeping it kind of short and sweet. So let's talk about how investigations go off the rails. So these are the top mistakes that we tend to see. Trisha, what's the first one you want to talk about?
Oh, my favorite is waiting too long or not starting at all. One of my favorites is, well, let's just wait a minute, see if this blows over, see if he or she calms down. We'll kind of tell them, "Oh, we'll check it out in a couple of weeks." That's an absolute hard no. What we typically recommend is a 24 to 48 hour start time. We could put it out to 72, but you better have a darn good reason for that 72 hours. 24 to 48 is what we typically want to see.
Yes. And as you know from past episodes, it never blows over. So, there's that. So the next big one is overpromising confidentiality. So while you do want to keep the investigation as confidential as possible, and you want to keep what witnesses tell you as confidential as possible, let's be real. Because of the nature of the questions you have to ask in an investigation, it is very difficult to not kind of let the cat out of the bag. So, what I tend to tell the complainant in particular is listen, I am never going to tell anybody that you are the one who filed this complaint. But particularly if it's a small company or a small department, I will say, this is a small company, this is a small department. People are going to make assumptions and they may assume that you are the one who filed the complaint. Again, they are not going to hear that from me, but if somebody comes to you, I want you to be prepared for that fact. And I don't want you to feel blindsided like I was trying to tell you, nobody's going to be able to figure it out. Also, from the nature of the questions I have to ask to verify what you are telling me, people again are going to at least be able to figure out who is involved. There's nothing I can do about that. It's part of my job as an investigator. So, again, I don't want you to be blindsided. I want you to understand that I will keep things as confidential as possible, but I cannot guarantee confidentiality.
I think that one is probably one of the most important ones that we can share. And out of all of these, there's some more fun ones though. Like, how about this? Interviewing like it's a debate. There's nothing that makes me cringe faster than when someone actually, especially if it's the complainant, and someone says, "Well, but earlier you stated," why are you trying to start a fight with the complainant? It took a lot of guts to come in and have this conversation with you. They're nervous. They're trying to get their thoughts together. They're trying to share. If you say something like that, you have just basically said you're frustrated, you're not listening, that you're trying to catch them in a lie. So, really, please be very, very careful, and also be careful about your reactions on the other hand. Like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I can't believe he did that." Well, you don't know if he did that. Using some empathy, the proper responses. Obviously, we want you to do that. We don't want you to be a robot. We don't want your employee to walk out thinking, "Gee, that was, horrible. They didn't listen, or they didn't have any reactions. They weren't human," because we are, again, human resources. So I want to remind you of that. And then, of course, there's that tipping of your hand. Sometimes when we interview like it's a debate, we actually can slip up and say things and break confidentiality on our own. So do not engage in some sort of a back and forth. It doesn't matter who it is with. Focus on your professionalism, practice, and really remember, like, you are there to serve a purpose, and that is to find the facts. Keep that neutral and impartial appearance and demeanor at all times.
Yeah, and that neutral and impartial demeanor is so important. So, managers, as we were saying earlier, like you're probably the first person an employee is going to come to. So, take a scenario like somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Bob just made a really offensive remark about my national origin." And you respond with something like, "Oh, that's just Bob. I wouldn't take it seriously." Just think of what that does to the employee who came to you. They now, number one, are thinking, Okay, well, this investigation ain't gonna go anywhere. Nothing's gonna be done about this, right? Because you just excused it. You just invalidated whatever this person was feeling. So you want to be really careful about your reactions. So Trisha and I always talk about scripts. So one of the things, we'll talk about this in just a minute, is we'll give you a little script that you can say when somebody comes to you, so you don't even have to think about it. But we're going to finish up with the things, the top mistakes we see. So leading questions. So putting some words into someone's mouth. This can be so easy to do because it's the natural way we talk. Like we try to finish each other's sentences, figure out where the person is going, but you don't want to do that. And sometimes when you're asking them questions, they need a little bit of time to figure out what it is they want to say or how they want to respond. So, for example, if somebody starts to say, well, I felt really, and they're pausing, searching for the word, and you go, uncomfortable, and they're like, yeah, yeah. Well, what if that wasn't the word they were searching for? What if the word they were going to say was apprehensive? There's a difference between those two words, right? So you want to just try to resist the temptation to complete their sentences or ask leading questions, which, of course, leading questions, I shouldn't say, of course, I'm a lawyer. Of course, I know what a leading question is, but you may not. Our listeners may not. But that's like if you, instead of asking, how was your relationship with Trisha? You asked, so your relationship with Trisha was pretty rocky? Because you're leading them to say, yeah, yeah, it was. Or, so that's a leading question versus an open-ended question, which is just, how is your relationship? So you want to make sure that you're asking more of those open-ended questions.
Going right along with that, they call it comparing stories, but what we mean by that is kind of the same thing. You're leading them to do something. Uh, Joe said that James said this. Is that true? You don't want to do that. You want to verify that they were in that place, and then you're going to say something like, can you tell me what James said? And that enough, once you have that, and then so now this person said it and Joe is your other witness who said it, that shows corroboration. You cannot show corroboration if you are comparing stories. It is not strong. It contaminates accounts, and we really want to avoid that. We want the story to come out of each individual's mouth. That is so much stronger when you have to present these facts.
The next one is skipping documentation. So this happens all the time because you're busy. We get it. But you've heard me say it. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen, especially when there is a legal issue at play. So, the other big thing is nobody ever remembers anything. You think you're going to, but you won't. So, make sure that you are writing down, taking careful notes during any interviews with any witnesses, and that you are also documenting other information that comes to you throughout the course of the investigation. And then your investigative report is the final piece of documentation, which should have everything that you relied upon to come to your conclusions in that investigation.
All right, now managers, the moment you've been waiting for, we're going to give you a mini playbook. So it's the what to do and the what not to do the moment someone brings you a concern. I think I'm going to tell you what you should do and leave the nots to Julie. So you want to, again, thank them. Make sure you thank them and stay neutral. I'm really glad you told me. I'm going to make sure this gets looked at. Or I'm really glad you told me. Let's go to HR. Do write down what you heard. Any dates, times, the who's, the what's, the where's, the why's. Remember those specifics. We all learned the WH and W&H questions when we were in grammar school. So really think about those, the specifics, and then make sure that you're taking those to HR. Do remind them about your anti-retaliation policy. Explain it to them if they don't know what it is. If you don't know what it is, go see your HR tomorrow and get that information so that you do know and can actually explain it so that your employee understands. And then what to do if something does change, if they feel that they are experiencing that type of policy violation. What should they do? Who should they take that to? Which, clear answer, HR.
Okay, now for the don'ts. I already said this one, but I'm going to say it again. Don't investigate on your own unless somebody in your company tells you to, and that somebody should be HR. So no on the side investigations. Don't fix the problem by moving the person who complained, changing their schedule, changing assignments, changing who they report to, or by going to the accused on the spot without HR present or without their guidance and saying, like, what the heck happened? What's going on? Because then you're going to end up in a he said, she said, or he said, or she said, she said, or whatever. And that's not going to be good either. You're just going to make things messy. And don't vent to coworkers. Actually, just beyond venting, don't talk to coworkers about this either. Because again, we want to keep it as confidential as possible. So it needs to be on what we call a need to know basis only. So there's a very tight circle there. It should be you, HR, maybe some other decision makers like an owner or a VP or somebody in the C-suite, but we try to keep that circle as tight as we can while the investigation is pending and also afterwards.
I think I want to just give them one more point as my final thought, and that really does go to that circle of trust, so to speak. You may be in that circle of trust at the beginning, and HR may end up looping you out. And that is okay. Trust me when I tell you that if they're doing that, they're not trying to micromanage you. They're not trying to exclude you purposefully, other than to protect you. They're doing that to protect you, to protect the company, to protect the employee. And so if you have a question about something as to why, ask your HR professional. Don't accuse them, but please understand that really and truly you will end up being looped out, and it is what you want us to do. I guarantee that. So your investigations do not have to be scary, but Julie and I always talk about being intentional. Well, guess what? Your investigations must be intentional as well. If you're winging it, you don't. Oh my good Lord. If you're winging it, you risk legal exposure. Fine. But even more than that, you're risking the trust of your employees. And if you lose that, you really do lose everything.
And if you're thinking, okay, well, this just raised a lot more questions for me than answers, that's okay. Investigations are tricky. So that is your sign to get training. And guess what? I mentioned it once already, but we have an investigation boot camp. It's a 2-day, very intensive course where we can get you up to speed and get you to be, if not a pro, better than amateur at investigations. And get you all ready to do that very first one. We can do a live, in person, or virtual training, or we have our online courses as well. So you can do that. Of course, there are other trainings out there as well, but they aren't going to be as fun as ours. But make sure that you get training. Make sure that you learn how to do this the right way, and then teach everybody else who might have to do investigations or who might be doing intake how to do those portions of that process so that you are consistent across the organization. So, with that, let's get back to our wine. Trish, how was your mocktail?
I am ready to pour another glass. It is really, really delicious. I'm super enjoying it. I thought I was going to miss my wine tonight. Obviously, I always miss wine, but this is fantastic. I will definitely be doing this on some hot days after a lawn mowing incident or something like that.
I hope it's not an incident that
Well,
requires
typically
an
with me it
investigation.
is.
Okay, well, I am still enjoying my bubbly. I really do like this one. So good job, Aveline. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us for this episode, Winos. We hope that we piqued your interest into investigations, or at least made you realize that you should not be winging it if you are. So make sure, of course, to follow our podcast wherever you are subscribing. So again, we need follows, not just subscriptions. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. We're going to start giving free stuff away soon, but you will need to be a follower of those pages to qualify. So if you can help us out, spread the word, talk to your friends, that would be awesome.
If you are listening from overseas, reach out and tell us how you found us. I am dying to figure this out and what you are finding interesting. And if there's anything that you'd like to hear us talk about, please, again, let us know that as well. And as always, everyone out there, feel free to reach out at any time with recommendations. That's wine recommendations, recommendations for the mocktails, recommendations for, well, really what you want to hear us whine about.
With that, cheers.
Cheers.